Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I'm Amy. Today I'm here to do my booktube-a-thon wrap up for you guys. So if you're interested in seeing how I fared, then go ahead and keep watching. So I did post a booktube-a-thon TBR and talked about all the challenges and whatnot. I'll link that up here if you haven't seen that and you want to see where I started out. But the first book that I read was Percy Jackson and the Olympians by Rick Riordan, and this is the first one, The Lightning Thief, and I really enjoyed this book. I was going to read this book read a book in one day and read an entire book outside. Neither of those things happened, at least for this book. I ran out of time. My day was super busy and I had started it and then we ended up going to dinner and things got crazy, so I finished it at 12:17. I missed it by 17 minutes, guys. It was kind of irritating, but I figured it didn't count, so I was gonna follow the rules. Regardless, this was the first book that I read, and like I said, I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. For those of you who may not know, Percy Jackson is the story about a boy who is about 12 or 13 years old, and he's always kind of had trouble in school and finding a place to fit in, and come to find out he may or may not have some very, very interesting parentage by an Olympian or a Greek god. If you haven't read these, I would highly recommend them. They're just really fun. It's a great escape, super easy to read. Like, I definitely could have read this in one day if I had organized my time better, but I didn't. So that's the first one I read. And the next book on my list was A Court of Thorns and Roses, and I'll leave that here because I'm kind of a dork and ended up reading it on my iPad because I lent it to a friend, forgetting that I had planned on reading it for booktube-a-thon, because I do have a copy, but I ended up just checking out the ebook from my library. And I decided to read this book for the challenge of read a book with a person on the cover and read a hyped book, and this book definitely meets both of those challenges. For those of you who, by some miraculous reason, may not know, A Court of Thorns and Roses is a story about a girl named Feyre who kills a fairy and is then taken away into the fairy world. And in this particular world, humans and fairies don't get along. They live separate lives. They don't like each other. And essentially, it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling. And it really disappointed me. I really was looking forward to this book. Beauty and the Beast is one of my favorite fairy tales and has been for as long as I can remember, and this book just fell short for me. I think I'm actually going to do a book chat on it just because I have things to say about it and I want to talk to you guys about it, but now is not the time to do it, otherwise we'll be here for a while. Regardless, I did give this book 2 out of 5 stars. I do plan to continue with the series because I am intrigued, but I think I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars because my hopes were so high and it just fell short, and I found the book problematic in a lot of ways. But like I said, keep an eye out for a book discussion on it. And the third book that I read, I actually didn't anticipate reading, and it wasn't part of my TBR, but I had requested it from my library and it came in on time, but I have already turned it back in, and that is Saga Volume 1. I don't remember the writer or illustrator, but I will leave their name on the screen. But this is a graphic novel that is very popular, and I was able to read this book as the challenge of reading a book in one day because it is a graphic novel. I think it took me about an hour, so it's a super quick read. And this is the story about 2 people who are on opposing sides of this galactic war, I believe, or it's these 2 warring planets, and they fall in love and they're running away from their respective governments, sort of, and they have a baby, and it was amazing. I absolutely loved it. I didn't know what to expect. This was my first graphic novel, and I had so much fun reading it. I made Aaron read it as well because I knew that he would love it, and I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I just had such a great time reading it, although I do have to say, I don't know if it's because I'm late to the Saga train, I didn't realize how rated M for mature that it was. There is definitely some content in this book that you should be aware about if you are concerned about the age of the person that may or may not be reading this book. This book is not for kids, and I didn't have a problem with it, just wasn't expecting it, and caught me off guard a little bit. But regardless, great story. You should totally go read it. And the fourth book that I read and the third book on my TBR was News of the World by Paulette Giles. I was reading this book to meet the challenge of read a book that is about a person who's different than you. And the main character in this book is Captain Jefferson Kyle Kidd. He's a 71-year-old war veteran. He was in the Civil War and the American Mexican-American War. So this takes place in the 1890s, and he used to be a printer and had a printing press and loved sending messages, and that just whole kind of theme was throughout the entire book, because now as a gentleman who lost his printing press during the Mexican-American War, he now goes around doing readings of newspapers all around Texas. So people pay a dime and they come in and they listen to him read various stories and articles from newspapers all over the world. And so I really, really love this concept. And then the main plot throughout this story is that the captain, as he's referred to in this book, is given a $50 coin or gold piece or whatever, and he is asked to take this girl named Joanna, who was captured by Indians and her parents were killed 4 years prior. And now Joanna is this wild child, according to them. She doesn't speak English, she doesn't have proper manners, etc., etc., and he is charged with taking her from North Texas to South Texas. And there is a map in this book, which I really enjoyed because it was just kind of cool to see the trajectory that they took. So I loved that part of the book. And this is just about their relationship and their journey. I loved this book. And let me tell you what, I was super skeptical at the beginning because this book has no quotations. None. Zero. Zilch. Super weird because there is dialogue, but it's not presented in the usual way, and I thought that was going to drive me batty, but I actually got used to it, and I really, really enjoyed this book. Paulette Giles describes the Texas landscapes and the different places that they go through so vividly, and it was absolutely wonderful. And I loved the relationship of the captain and Joanna and them learning to communicate with one another and get to know each other and trust each other. And I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars, which I totally didn't anticipate, especially in the beginning. I will tell you though, this book is a slow burner. This is not like an exciting Western shoot 'em up kind of book, which I anticipated it being a little bit. There is one instance kind of in the middle of the book where it gets a little bit exciting, but that is the extent of it. And I actually really enjoyed that part of the book just because I very rarely read the book where, I wouldn't say it was the climax because it definitely wasn't the climax, but as far as like the adrenaline and excitement, the peak was in the middle, and I thought that was interesting and fun. And I do love slow burning books, and I love books that are character driven, and this book most certainly was. I would totally recommend it. I've never read a book like it, and I so enjoyed reading it. And the last book on my TBR, and the 5th book that I managed to read half of. I didn't get all the way through it, unfortunately, but I'm gonna include it anyways because I finished it the next day, and that is Tell the Wolves I'm Home by Carol Rivka Brunt. This was to meet the challenge of read a book that you bought because of the cover. The cover drew me in, and then I read the back of the book, and I was like, hey, this sounds super interesting. And this is the story about June Elvis. In 1987, she's a 14-year-old girl who her uncle, who is also her best friend, passes away of a mysterious illness that her mother refuses to acknowledge. And this book was interesting in the sense there were parts of this book that I loved, that was like 5 out of 5 star material, but then there were other parts of this book that were like 2 out of 5 star material, and that really disappointed me. So I just settled on 3 out of 5, although I just feel like that seems too simple for what this book was. I'm thinking about doing a book review on this one just because of that whole phenomenon that I had while reading this book, because there were parts of this book that I was super bored and other parts that I thought were super interesting. And this is definitely a character-based book. This isn't like a super exciting, like drive you through type of book, and I would say give it a shot because there's some really interesting themes in this book and really interesting ideas that I really enjoyed reading about, but there were just some parts that just didn't do it for me. So, like I said, I didn't technically finish it for booktube-a-thon, but I finished it the next day, so I just thought I'd include it anyways. And there you have it. So there you go, guys. Those were the books that I read for booktube-a-thon. This was my first booktube-a-thon and first read-a-thon, and I had so much fun. I actually plan on doing the tome topple with Sam over from Thoughts on Tomes, and I'm super excited. That's a read-a-thon all about reading books over 500 pages, which I absolutely love big books. I will be hopefully posting my TBR for that very shortly since it starts on the 4th of August. So hopefully I'll get this video up today, and the 4th of August is tomorrow. But thank you so much for watching, you guys. Let me know what books you read over booktube-a-thon or what your thoughts were on these books, and like this video if you like it, please, and if you loved it, please subscribe, and we'll see you in my next video. Happy reading. Better they reading. Thumbnail, 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 thumbnail. Don't forget the thumbnail.